The Chronos Garden. Ilara, a botanist on a desolate orbital station, discovers that an ancient dormant seed found on a distant exoplanet can manipulate local time when exposed to specific energy frequencies. Her experiments accelerate growth patterns, but also create temporal echoes of past flora. Haunted by her past failures in planetary terraforming and the loss of her sister, Ilara becomes obsessed with perfecting the seed's activation to bring back a memory of a vibrant, living world. When her actions inadvertently create a dangerous temporal ripple, she faces a choice: continue her personal quest or sacrifice her hope to prevent a catastrophic time distortion. The constant hum of the Stardust Cradle station was Ilara's lullaby, her companion for 10 cycles in the void. Below, the scarred surface of Xylos 7 spun, a desolate canvas of ochre and rust. Her biodome, a pressurized bubble of recycled air and muted grow lights, was her sanctuary, her penance. Here, amidst sterile trays of meticulously catalogued rock samples and trace elements, lay her latest obsession, the Chronos seed. It wasn't much to look at: a pebble-sized obsidian sphere, smooth to the touch, with a faint, almost imperceptible pulsation. It had been found in a deep, geologically stable cave system on Xylos 7, untouched for millennia, an enigma amongst the planet's lifeless basalt plains. Initial scans had yielded nothing: no DNA, no discernible energy signature, just inert, ancient rock. Until Ilara, driven by a hunch born of countless failed terraforming attempts and a deep-seated grief, exposed it to a newly calibrated pulsed gamma frequency. The effect was subtle at first: a faint tremor in the soil around the seed. Then a ghostly, shimmering silhouette of a fern, growing and decaying in a blink, leaving behind no physical trace. Ilara's breath hitched. A temporal echo. Her previous project, the Eden Initiative on Kepler 186f, had been a disaster. A series of miscalculated atmospheric injections had triggered a cascade failure, turning a nascent blue-green world into a toxic dust bowl. Her sister, Lyra, a xenobotanist who had championed Ilara's theories, had been on the surface when the final collapse occurred. The guilt was a constant companion, a ghost in her own personal biodome. The Chronos seed offered not just scientific discovery, but a perverse, impossible hope, a chance to see life, any life, flourish again, even if only in ephemeral flashes. Days blurred into weeks. Ilara optimized the gamma pulses, adjusting frequency, duration, and amplitude. The temporal echoes grew more vibrant, more frequent. Mosses shivered into existence, their phantom fronds unfurling in seconds, then dissolving. Small flowering plants burst forth, their petals shimmering with impossible colors before fading like forgotten dreams. She meticulously logged every parameter, every ghostly bloom, her face illuminated by the data stream scrolling across her main console. The isolation didn't bother her, it facilitated her singular focus. The station commander, an amiable but distant man named Commander Rorik, only checked in for routine supply updates. He saw Ilara as an eccentric genius, harmless in her pursuits. One cycle, she stumbled upon a resonant frequency that did more than echo. A single iridescent bluebell bloomed, its translucent petals holding form for a full minute, then slowly, gracefully pixelating into nothingness. It was more substantial, a longer echo, a firmer grasp on the past. Ilara felt a tremor of exhilaration, mingled with a familiar, dangerous hunger. She remembered Lyra's sketches, her vibrant depictions of the hypothesized flora of Kepler 186f based on ancient genetic fragments. What if she could bring back that? Not just an echo, but a prolonged, tangible manifestation. She pushed the Chronos seed harder, redirected more power from the station's secondary capacitors. The hum intensified, a low thrumming that resonated through the deck plating. The biodome began to glow with a soft, fluctuating azure light. The bluebells returned, dozens of them, then small, shimmering trees, their branches swaying in an unseen breeze. It was a garden of ghosts, beautiful and heartbreaking. Then the temporal distortions began to leak beyond the biodome. Commander Rorik's voice crackled over the comms, laced with confusion. "Ilara, what in the cosmos is happening? The main reactor telemetry is showing oscillations." The Maestro's silence. In early 20th century Vienna, aspiring composer Lena, burdened by societal expectations and her family's poverty, secretly studies under the reclusive and aging Maestro Victor Thorn. Thorn, once celebrated, now suffers from a rare neurological condition that causes him to hear music as unbearable cacophony. Lena's natural talent, combined with her empathy for his silent suffering, allows her to translate his internal, distorted melodies into coherent scores. Their unique collaboration blossoms, but Thorn's condition worsens, threatening to silence his genius forever and expose Lena's hidden aspirations to her disapproving family. The cobbled streets of Vienna, usually alive with the lilt of waltzes and the distant thrum of orchestras, were a torment to Maestro Victor Thorn. Once, his compositions had soared, filling grand concert halls with a unique blend of melancholic grandeur and vibrant innovation. Now, every note, every chord, was a jagged shard of sound, a dissonant screech that tore at the delicate tapestry of his mind. A rare neurological affliction had robbed him of the very essence of his being, the ability to hear harmony. All music, from a child's nursery rhyme to a Beethoven symphony, was an unbearable cacophony. He lived in silence, a self-imposed exile in his decaying mansion, the city's vibrant melodies a constant, painful reminder of what he had lost. Lena, with her slender fingers often stained with ink and her dreams overflowing with unheard melodies, knew the maestro's plight better than anyone. Not because she was a celebrated musician, but because she was his cleaner. Twice a week, she swept the dust from his grand piano, polished the silent brass of his trombones, and carefully arranged the stacks of forgotten scores, each movement a silent prayer for the music to return. Her own family, pragmatic and impoverished, scoffed at her artistic inclinations. "Music won't feed us, Lena," her mother would sigh, her voice weary from a lifetime of relentless work. "Marry well, and forget these foolish notions." Lena's passion for composition, a defiant flame in her soul, was a secret she guarded fiercely. One blustery autumn afternoon, Lena found Thorn slumped at his piano, his face contorted in pain, hands pressed against his temples. A lone, stray street musician's accordion wheezed a distorted tune from outside. "It's unbearable," he rasped, his voice rough. "The notes, they twist, they snarl, a monster." Impulsively, Lena picked up a quill and a fresh sheet of manuscript paper. "Maestro," she began, her voice barely a whisper, "can you describe the twist, the snarl? Not what it is, but what it feels like to you." Thorn looked at her, his eyes, usually distant, sharpened with a flicker of curiosity. He began, haltingly at first, then with increasing urgency, describing the sensation of sound. A deep rumble, like a collapsing mineshaft, but with a sharp, piercing glint, like a broken mirror. Lena, astonishingly, began to transcribe, not the sound, but the feeling. The collapsing mineshaft became a low, sustained C minor chord, the broken mirror a dissonant, sharp tritone. Their collaboration blossomed in the quiet of the decaying mansion. Lena, the hidden composer, became Thorn's ears, his interpreter. He would hum, a tuneless, guttural sound, and describe the internal chaos it evoked. A flock of startled birds, each feather a different frequency, colliding in the air. Lena would translate, her pen flying across the page, capturing the frantic flight in a complex, overlapping arpeggio, the collision in a sharp, unexpected fortissimo. She wasn't just writing down his descriptions, she was intuiting the music he meant to hear, the harmony he desperately sought amidst the internal discord.
Her own talent, honed in secret, found its true purpose in this unique bond. Thorn's silent genius, once trapped, began to flow through her. The compositions that emerged were unlike anything Vienna had heard. Raw, emotionally charged, yet exquisitely structured, they resonated with a profound sense of loss and triumphant beauty. Thorn, with Lena's discreet guidance, presented them as rediscovered works from a forgotten master. The city, starved for novelty, embraced them. Lena, hidden in the shadows, felt a quiet pride, a dangerous joy. But Thorn's condition, though seemingly alleviated by their work, continued to worsen. The cacophony intensified, forcing him into longer periods of silent agony. One day he collapsed, muttering about the great silence approaching.
The echo of the labyrinth. Ilara, a renowned urban explorer, delves into a forgotten underground complex beneath a perpetually foggy coastal town, drawn by the legend of its creator, the eccentric cartographer Alastair Finch, who vanished within its depths. She discovers the complex is a sprawling, psychological labyrinth designed to trap Finch's anxieties. As she navigates its shifting passages, solving Finch's increasingly deranged puzzles, she uncovers unsettling parallels to her own past and realizes the labyrinth intends to consume her mind. Ilara must use her unique skills to outsmart the collapsing structure and escape before she becomes another lost echo within Finch's madness. The mist, a perpetually damp shroud, clung to the coastal town of Oakhaven like a forgotten memory. Locals called it the Whispering Fog, claiming it carried the echoes of the lost. For Ilara Vance, a name synonymous with urban exploration and forgotten histories, it was an invitation. She'd come for Alastair Finch, the eccentric cartographer who'd vanished 50 years ago, leaving behind a legacy of meticulously drawn maps and the unsettling legend of the subterranean labyrinth beneath Oakhaven. Finch's journals, recently unearthed and acquired by a shadowy collector who then hired Ilara, spoke of a grand architectural project, a personal sanctuary built to house his cognitive cartographies. But the later entries descended into paranoia, detailing shifting walls, echoing whispers, and a growing conviction that the labyrinth was alive, reflecting and amplifying his deepest fears. Ilara found the entrance in a crumbling sea cave, half hidden by high tide. It was a perfectly carved stone archway, incongruous against the natural rock, leading into absolute darkness. Her headlamp cut through the black, revealing rough-hewn tunnels, cool and smelling of damp earth and salt. The air was thick, heavy, as if the fog permeated even these depths. Following Finch's initial, precise maps, she navigated a series of winding corridors, each lined with unnervingly smooth stone. The first hint of the labyrinth's true nature came in a grand circular chamber. Etched into the floor was a colossal compass rose, its directions ever so slightly off-kilter. As Ilara stepped onto it, a low groan echoed, and the walls subtly shifted, closing off a passage she'd just seen. Finch's notes flashed in her mind. The labyrinth shifts with my thoughts, a mirror of my disquiet. Her skills as an explorer were paramount. She relied on spatial memory, subtle air currents, and the unique resonance of her footsteps against different surfaces. But this place defied logic. Passages she'd sworn were left suddenly appeared on the right. Dead ends opened into new, seemingly endless corridors. The silence was profound, broken only by the drip of unseen water and, increasingly, faint, disembodied whispers. "Failure," a voice hissed, soft as the fog itself, from behind a newly formed wall. Ilara froze. It was her own internal critique, the one that sometimes plagued her after a risky climb or a near miss. "You're not good enough. You missed the sign." The labyrinth was not merely shifting, it was responding. It was drawing on Finch's mind, perhaps, but also her own. The next chamber was a recreation of her childhood bedroom, but distorted, elongated, the cherished objects warped and sinister.
Her old teddy bear had too many eyes. Her favorite book bled black ink. Finch's madness was her own. She found Finch's later journals in a hidden alcove, scrawled furiously on brittle pages. It feeds on me, my doubts, my regrets. It builds itself from my despair. I am the architect, the prisoner, and the meal. He spoke of a core, a central chamber, where the labyrinth's consciousness resided, a place he simultaneously sought and dreaded. If I reach it, I will be free, or I will be wholly consumed. Ilara pressed on, the whispers growing louder, more personal. Lyra trusted you. A sharp pang. Lyra, her climbing partner, lost on a perilous ascent, due to a misjudged knot, a mistake Ilara had always blamed herself for. The labyrinth built a crevasse before her, bottomless, mimicking the chasm that had swallowed Lyra. Ilara, trembling, found a hidden ledge. She refused to be consumed by her past, or by Finch's. The puzzles grew more insidious. A room filled with seemingly random levers, each pull triggering a distorted memory from her life. Another, a maze of mirrors where her reflection warped, showing her deepest insecurity.
The Whispering Canopy. In a fantastical realm, Lyra, a reclusive elderwood warden who communicates with trees through an ancient inherited magic, notices a creeping blight consuming her sacred forest. The blight infects the trees' communal consciousness, turning their whispers into tormented screams that drain the forest's life. Initially resistant due to a past magical accident that scarred her, Lyra must overcome her fear and delve into the dying roots of the elderwood, where she discovers the blight is a manifestation of an ancient, forgotten sorrow. She must harness her unique connection to transmute the pervasive pain, saving her forest and embracing her destiny. Lyra, her fingers calloused from bark and roots, traced the intricate patterns on the elderwood's oldest sentinel, a grand sequoia known as the heart tree. The forest had always whispered to her, a symphony of rustling leaves, creaking branches, and the deep, slow thrum of roots intertwining beneath the earth. It was a language only she, as the last elderwood warden, truly understood, a gift inherited through generations of her isolated lineage. But lately, the whispers had begun to sour, turning into fretful murmurs, then agitated sighs. Now they were screams. A creeping blight, a sickly gray moss, was spreading through the canopy, draining the vibrant emerald hues from the leaves and leaving behind brittle, skeletal branches. It wasn't merely physical decay. Lyra could feel it in the forest's consciousness. The blight infected the very essence of the trees, turning their communal whispers into tormented cries that echoed painfully in her mind, leeching not just their sap, but their will to live. Lyra had always been reclusive, even for a warden. Years ago, a magical accident during a novice ritual had left a shimmering scar on her left arm, a reminder of uncontrolled power and a deep fear of the volatile magic within her. She preferred the quiet company of trees to the unpredictable chaos of sentient beings. The thought of delving into the blight's source, an act that would require a deep, perilous immersion into the forest's dying consciousness, filled her with dread. Her magic, her connection, was both her strength and her curse. The smaller trees began to wilt, their cries fading into silence as their life force drained. The creatures of the forest, usually vibrant and playful, became lethargic, their eyes clouded with despair. The squirrels no longer chittered playful threats, the birds sang no more. The elderwood, her home, her family, was dying. One evening, as the last rays of sun cast long, skeletal shadows through the dying trees, Lyra found the ancient, gnarled root father, the oldest and deepest root system of the elderwood, now a dark, pulsing mass of gray moss. Its usual deep, comforting hum was a horrifying, gurgling sob. She knelt, placing her scarred hand on its trembling surface. The pain that flooded her mind was overwhelming, not just physical decay, but a profound, ancient sorrow, a grief so vast it threatened to consume her. It wasn't a blight of disease, she realized with a jolt that sent shivers down her spine. It was a blight of sorrow. The moss was a manifestation of pervasive, unaddressed grief, born from a tragedy so ancient it had been forgotten by all but the deepest consciousness of the elderwood. A primordial trauma, perhaps a cataclysm that had nearly wiped out the forest in ages past. It had never truly healed. It had festered, dormant for centuries, until a subtle shift in the magical currents of the land had reawakened it. The elderwood was not sick, it was weeping. To heal it, Lyra knew she couldn't just fight the moss. She had to transmute the sorrow. This was no simple spellcasting. It required the last call at the Neon Orchid. Ilara, a reclusive elderly artist living above her dilapidated gallery, finds her quiet routine disrupted by the arrival of a vibrant young street artist, Finn. Initially resentful of Finn's noisy, modern art and his encroachment on her space, Ilara soon discovers that Finn's work, vibrant murals, are inspired by the forgotten histories of the decaying neighborhood she cherishes. A reluctant connection forms as they collaborate on a secret mural on the gallery's back wall. As the neighborhood faces gentrification, Ilara's fading sight threatens her artistic contribution, forcing her to confront her fears of irrelevance and embrace a new form of collaboration, intertwining her legacy with Finn's modern vision. Ilara's world was a muted palette of grays and browns, the colors of old canvas, dust, and the fading light filtering through the grimy windows of her gallery, the Neon Orchid. Once a vibrant hub in the city's artistic underground, it now stood as a dilapidated relic in a forgotten neighborhood, its neon sign flickering sporadically, a dying heart in a crumbling chest. Ilara, herself a creature of habit and solitude, spent her days touching up long unsold landscapes, the scent of turpentine her only constant companion. Her vision, like the gallery, was slowly fading, leaving the edges of her world blurred. Her quiet routine was shattered by the arrival of Finn, a whirlwind of spray paint cans, booming hip-hop, and an almost offensively vibrant energy. He set up shop on the vacant lot next to her gallery, transforming its cracked walls into a kaleidoscope of swirling lines and defiant figures. Street art, he'd called it, grinning, his teeth bright against his tan skin. Ilara, a purist of oils and brushes, scoffed. "Vandalism," she muttered, pulling her curtains tighter against the assault of his sound and color. Finn, oblivious to her disdain, kept working. He had a way of moving, fluid and unburdened, that irked Ilara. He was everything she wasn't anymore, young, bold, seen. She overheard him talking to a passerby once, explaining his latest mural. "It's about the old butcher shop that used to be here," he'd said, pointing to a swirl of red and white. "Mr. Petrov, who fed the whole block during the lean years." Ilara paused, her brush suspended mid-air. Mr. Petrov. She remembered his booming laugh, the sawdust on his floor. Finn wasn't just splattering paint, he was painting memories, her memories. A reluctant connection began to form. Finn, sensing her silent observation, started leaving small sketches on her doorstep. Charcoal outlines of old buildings, faded storefronts, a lone lamppost she'd painted 100 times. He never spoke, just left the art. One evening, he knocked. "Saw your work, Miss Vance," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "The way you capture light, it's like a dream." He wasn't flattering her. He genuinely saw something. Ilara, disarmed, found herself inviting him in, pointing out the nuances of chiaroscuro in a dusty portrait. He listened, truly listened, with an artist's keen eye. Then came the news: gentrification. The entire block was slated for demolition. Trendy cafes and sterile apartments would replace the crumbling charm. The Neon Orchid, her sanctuary, would fall. Finn, surprisingly, was as devastated as she was. "This isn't just concrete, Miss Vance," he said, gesturing at the grimy brick of her gallery. "It's history, it's stories." "We need to tell them," Ilara said, a spark igniting in her fading eyes. One last time. They decided on a secret mural on the gallery's hidden back wall, a wall that would face the alley, a place no one would think to look until demolition began. It would be their final defiance, a silent scream against erasure. Finn would do the bold outlines, the large-scale figures of the neighborhood's forgotten characters. Mr. Petrov, the laughing baker, the stern librarian. Ilara, with her precise, delicate touch, would add the details, the glint in an eye, the texture of worn fabric, the subtle interplay of light and shadow that brought a soul to life. But her vision was worsening rapidly. The outlines Finn drew were sharp, but when she tried to fill them in, the colors bled, the lines wavered. Frustration gnawed at her. She, the master of detail, was failing. She felt the cold grip of irrelevance, the fear that her contribution would be clumsy, a smudge on Finn's vibrant canvas. "I can't," she whispered one night, dropping her brush. "It's too blurry. My hands, they shake." Finn looked at her, his usual boisterous energy replaced by a quiet understanding. He picked up her hand, tracing the faint lines on her palm. "It's not about perfect lines anymore, Ilara," he said, using her first name for the first time. "It's about what you feel, what you remember.